This is Duke University.
It's really important that future leaders in international development have the ability to not just translate themselves, but value translation as a skill. When you're working in international development, you're working with public policy, you're working with business leaders, you're working with innovators and entrepreneurs, you're working with universities, and the ability to appreciate translation amongst all of these things and the desire to bring all of these elements together is incredibly important. Because when you're working in international development, you're dealing with complex systems, much like you would be dealing with in the US, but you've had different infrastructure challenges. You've got different kind of cultural challenges, and the ability to translate and appreciate translation and appreciate context and cultural competency is something that I think is incredibly important for any leader to bring to that position, but for any organization to also be able to absorb, facilitate, and grow. Because if you are a single note, a piano has 88 keys, and if you're one single note, you're not going to get the complex melodies that are necessary in these broader challenges that we face. You can start broadcasting your message all over the place, but if you don't have the right message at the right time to the right people, you're not going to get the kinds of solutions that you want. And so the ability to craft that message, get it out, have mutual interests met, both from an acting point and from a success and kind of implementation standpoint. All of those things together are absolutely necessary. And it's really hard when you're used to being your own note. Like, why should I translate? Doesn't this person understand? Doesn't the policymaker just understand my science? I've heard that over and over again. Well, why don't they understand? It's science. It works. And there are multiple and varied interests that they have to take into account. There are business interests that have to be taken into account. There are political messaging interests that have to be taken into account. And when you're only sounding your note and you can't hear all of the other things that are necessary, you're sounding your note alone. That choir of one is not really that powerful. I think social entrepreneurs are interesting to this mix because they can experiment in ways that kind of the longer term, more traditional actors may not be able to experiment. And so they can start doing much like, the early startups in the dot-com era, kind of the late 90s and early 2000s. They can start doing different kinds of things that bigger players don't have the risk for. And social entrepreneurs can take some of the risks and do some of the experimentation and learn some lessons rather rapidly and iterate more quickly than some of the more kind of established players may be able to. But the necessity of kind of both the policy community and the larger community and the communications elements within all of that is being able to think about what pieces of what the social entrepreneurs are doing are extractable and translatable to a larger organization. So it's not necessarily that you can take a program whole cloth and dump it into an existing system and magically it will work. Economies of scale aren't always the things that you want, because there's always unintended consequences to, kind of doing things in a new way. And so the social entrepreneur, to me, kind of de-risks, it creates a space to be experimental, be more rapidly iterate, and then extrapolate those lessons learned to a much larger community that is on the lookout for things that can help their programs be more effective, but may not have the space and may not have the skills to integrate some of those things. And so being able to bring all of those communities together and being able to bring all those stakeholders together is incredibly important. And that's another role that I think policymakers can play. We create the convening, we create the space, and can help set the agenda in partnership to have the dialogues around these things that a single player by themselves might not be able to do. Again, it's assembling that orchestra of people that are all necessary to create the next great concerto. My advice for any student that's trying to be a multilingual tri-sector leader with international development is that your technical chops, while very important, will never be enough. Your ability to translate, build empathy within yourself and exhibit that empathy for others is incredibly important, because the international development context is very complex, and your ability to engage and translate across cultures is something that can stop you cold, or it can help you keep moving. And so the ability to listen, and listen well, and listen often before you've made up your mind, before, it may not be you that has the solution. And the humility in that is incredibly important. Empathy and humility, to me, are some of the most critical things that you must build if you want to work in international development.